So I just saw, just as I came in the door, someone emailed a question. Don't know who had the question. Something about thinking and meditating, or ideas and meditating. That was yours. Okay.
And I realised during one of my sessions that I seem to be having logical conversations about acceptance whilst breathing, and just wondering how those two things interact. Sometimes it's, and some things came to me, so it's not always a bad thing to have the mind talking or analysing or rationalising, and how it links in with the breathing.
Right. So, I don't know how I'm going to get into this. I'll try and find a way in. It's a big subject, I suppose, isn't it? You know, thinking basically, and meditating. So covers quite a lot of ground to be covered with that. I mean, the way we were taught, the kind of culture within the monastery was not to basically meditate on themes. You've already got a theme going on, which is your body, and you're already up to doing in your and in your, you know, and goal orientated in the way we are. That's the, you know, we're already like that, because the whole thing that's going on is that we want things to be other than they are, or better than they are. You know, so when we sit down to meditate, it's not uncommon to have an agenda to try, or a hope or a dream that we're going to, as a result of meditating, have a better experience than the experience we had before we started meditating. Otherwise we probably wouldn't even do it. Why would we do it? So, but then meditating, or the word meditation, has the implication of a doing already, doesn't it? That's why I don't particularly like it, because we're already up to doing. That's what we're up to already. So we bring doing to the table, so we don't need to add doing on top of doing. Otherwise, the knot just gets tighter. So, I mean, the way I see it is there are four postures in life: the sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. How often do we just sit, just walk, just stand, or just lie down? It's always a lot more complicated than that. And that's because our body and mind are out of sync. Our body and mind are fragmented. That's why we can be walking along the street and bumping into a lamppost, because we're having a conversation with a boyfriend or something as we're walking along the street. That's why when we lie down we can't get to sleep, you know, because even though we're lying down and the room's dark, our mind's racing away, you know, somewhere else. And that's why when we sit down to meditate, we can't just sit. I mean, ultimately that's all it is. It's just sitting. It's actually no more than that. But because we're so fragmented, we can't just do it. So what sitting down to meditate does is it amplifies the split between the body and the mind. The emphasis in the Theravada is very simple. It's to do what needs to be done in order to reduce that split. And we say if you reduce the split between the body and the mind, then your true, real intelligence will become operative. It's not that thinking will cease, it's just that your thinking will become synchronized to something that's real, as opposed to be a sort of dislocated, spinning top, or monkey swinging through the trees completely. As we used to say, you'd be sword fighting in Transylvania, so while you're sitting on your mat. See, the thing that happens as you begin to just sit, or begin to reduce that split between the body and mind, as you do the work, we quickly go through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which I always have to do when I'm here because it's key and most people don't seem to know it, is that your mind starts to become stilled. And as your mind becomes more stilled, you begin to enjoy that stillness of mind. And there's a sense of deep satisfaction, a sense of finally becoming rooted in something that doesn't fail us. Because, you know, every thought you've had, every view and opinion you've had has failed you ultimately. You know, if you think I believe in God and you really rely on that thought, then one day, sooner or later, you're going to have the thought, I don't believe in God. And then what happens? Then you freak out and you have to run around trying to convince yourself and everybody around you that you believe in God, because you can't stand the thought that you don't believe in God. So, I mean, it goes like that. If you think, oh, I'm okay, I've got it together, then one day you're going to think, I'm not okay, I'm totally untogether. So this is the way it goes. We try to define our circumstance, our situation through our thinking, but ultimately it turns against us. Similarly with feelings, if we allow ourselves to be defined by our feelings, then when we feel good, we feel happy, but then when we feel bad, we become bad. We feel bad, and that's what we think we are. We become down. So it becomes a roller coaster, but we're wanting to get this evenness, this samadhi, this natural samadhi of the mind, which is a quality of serenity when the mind is truly stilled. It's more than serenity, but serenity is one of its facets. So when we sit down to meditate, it's addressing this split between the body and mind that's fundamental. You're not really in a position to contemplate acceptance. For example, if your head and heart are not synchronized, and if your head and heart and body are not synchronized, and if your head, heart, and body are synchronized, then you don't need to think about acceptance. You'll understand it, and it's implicit. So you'll know what it is implicitly. There's a place for thought in meditation, but it's just as a pointer. So for example, we talk about the first foundation of mindfulness. It's the Kayanusati. So synchronized with in and out breathing, centering one's awareness at the center of the chest, to contemplate the 32 parts of the body. So hair of the head, nails, teeth, skin. So I'm not thinking hair of the head. Well, I'm thinking of it as a pointer. So think hair of the head, and then that points me to the sensation. So I go to the sensation. Nails. You can actually feel the nails in the tip of your fingers. So you say nails. You're not thinking nails. You use this nail. The idea of nails is what we call a transitional concept. So it helps you send your attention to the thing that's named. But then when you sense the thing that's named, you abandon the name. You abandon the thought. So hair of the head, nails, teeth, skin, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, bones, spine, saliva, blood. Going through the 32 parts of the body like that, it's a way of sensitizing our relationship to the body, because what we've done is we've desensitized our relationship to the body. All of us, that's what we do. That's what ignorance is. It's because the body is vulnerable. It's 90% water, it's flesh and bone, in the midst of a universe that's totally beyond our understanding, and it's going to destroy the body. It seems, we're all going to end up in the ground. So this is the one thing that's quite threatening on one level. We want it to live for, we don't want to die, and the body seems to be definitive of who we are, so we desensitize it. We don't want to feel its vulnerability. It can be penetrated easily just by a thorn or a stick or a knife or a bullet or a bit of metal. It's vulnerable. So that's why we because we don't want to feel the anxiety that surrounds that fact. We don't want to deal with that. So we have to unravel all of this, because there's a misunderstanding. The body appears to be who and what I am, but the body isn't who and what I am, and that's what we discover. So we say, go towards the thing that scares us most. It's like a rope in the grass that we think is a snake. You see it and you go into shock. But if you actually look at it closely, you discover it's not the thing you thought it was when you glimpsed it at first. And we have only really glimpsed the body. We've not really inspected it thoroughly. We've not really undergone a deep investigation of who and what it is, because we operate on this consensus reality, and just kind of someone says your name and you say their name and you just assume that, but on some level we are all aware of some sort of bewilderment. We all kind of know. When you're with somebody else, you don't really know what's going on. Who are you talking to, and who's being talked to by the person that's responding? Who's listening? Who's hearing? And when you see yourself in the mirror, who are you seeing? I think okay, some people look in the mirror just to see if they're looking good or not that day, but more often than not, it's just the mystery as well of looking at the thing that stares back at you and wondering what the hell it is. And so, there's a whole journey of discovery here to be undertaken. So, yes, you can use concepts to initiate this journey. So, first foundation of mindfulness, 32 parts of the body, they're concepts. But you use the concepts to sensitize yourself to those parts of the body. You begin to become more sensitive to the body. You'll notice, far from being what might superficially sound like a horrifically unpleasant thing to meditate on, your mind starts to become really peaceful, and it becomes quite a pleasurable thing because your body and mind are unified. You're using skillful thoughts or wise thoughts to bring you into closer association to what's actually there, and not using your thoughts as a way of trying to escape what's actually there. As you do that, then you'll become more sensitive to sensations, painful, pleasurable, and neutral. So these sensations have a particular quality, which is everything starts to become more and more undefined or undefinable. We can define the heart or the lungs or the nails, teeth, hair. They've got a certain solidity to them, but when you get to sensations, well, where's the middle and where's the edge of a sensation? It doesn't have, those terms don't really apply. Sensation is a field, isn't it? It's just like a field, a vibrational field. If you go into it to experience pleasant sensation or an unpleasant sensation, a pain in your knee, an itch on your nose, if you really go into it and drop the thought, my nose or my knee, what's there? You can't really say it's a thing. It doesn't have quite the same characteristic as a thing. The body is apparently a thing when you look at it from the outside, but that's an appearance. It's the distinction between appearances and what's real. So we're getting to what's real by going to the inside. So when you begin to get into the sensations, then your mind kind of opens up another notch. It's like dilation of a pupil. Your inner eye gets bigger. Because you've gone from the 32 parts of the body to the 3 sensations. The 32 parts disappear, and the 32 become the 3. And that's all. You're just 3 sensations without middle, without an edge. And then the next thing that appears is the objects of awareness that arise within. They call it the Jittanusati, which is to do with the relationship between this inner eye, this expanded inner eye of awareness, and everything that passes through it. So you can think in terms of space on the outside world, the world that we all know and see. It's the relationship between space and the objects that pass through the space. So if I come into this room, for example, and then I just speak to you, don't look at anybody else, then everyone else disappears, don't they? And so I contract. My attention sort of just becomes glued to you. Everyone else disappears because that's all I'm noticing. But if I don't get glued to you and stay attuned to not only the space but all the objects in the space, then my field of awareness is much, much larger, much more sort of accommodating. And of course, if you stay attuned to the space, you connect to something that's not confined even by the room, because the space isn't confined by the room. It goes on beyond the room and beyond the earth, beyond this galaxy. So same on the inside. If you contract around a difficult feeling, a difficult sensation, whatever, you lose perspective. If you contract around a thought or an obsessive thought, you'll lose perspective. So, because that's all that exists, everything, nothing else exists. So, this is why we use the breath, because the breath has this characteristic of space. It's open. It opens things up, and it's an antidote for this tendency we have to contract and rigidify around things. So you'll notice process of contraction in meditation. And that's what this third level of mindfulness is about. It's noticing how, in a sense, you're uncontracted and then you're contracted around something. You become obsessed with a thought or a feeling or a sensation. You notice a tightening of your mind, of your awareness, of your body, and then you loosen it off again. So you can sustain the sense of being whole as opposed to partial or fragmented by becoming obsessed just by a part of your experience. Again, all of this is tied in with the breath. So like I said, with the breathing, we can become very compartmentalized, very focused on a sensation, in my shoulder or in my knee, and just, working with the breath in that area, which is fine. That can happen, but also ultimately we need to learn to become less congested, to become more sort of rounded, so we're feeling the body as a whole and not sort of getting locked into little compartments. The main compartment that we get locked into, of course, is our brains. So in terms of technique, that's our main technique. That's what the Buddha taught. Then lastly, the fourth foundation of mindfulness, they call Dhammanussati, which is contemplation of Dhammas. And this is where you might think it's about thinking, because, it's like contemplation of the three characteristics of existence, impermanence, for example. But like I say, you're just using the notion of impermanence just as a quick way of opening the program, so you can attune yourself to the experience of impermanence. So you say, impermanence is like this. It's like opening a computer program. If you hit the right key, the program just opens. Same with these concepts or these thoughts. That's how you really want them to work. So they're just like there for a flash, and then you're into the experience. If you find that your thinking mind is at the center of what you're experiencing, then it has too much. It has too much dominance. It needs to, as awareness becomes more trusted, it recedes more and more into the background. So you feel empty, but intelligence spontaneously arises. That's what source of all creativity. That's what creative people are about. All creative people do the same thing. They empty themselves so that life can flow through them with a force. If you're going to use thought, I would suggest using the 32 parts of the body. That's what I would suggest. And not sort of bypass the very basic process of working with this division of body and mind, if that makes any sense. And ultimately, I think thought becomes more and more less and less solid, less and less present. We had to learn something as monks called the Patimokkha. If you were a monk for 5 years, then traditionally they sent you on retreat. You're supported, and you just had 3 months off to learn the Patimokkha. It's 10,000 words of Pali. And you chant it very, very fast, like very fast. It takes 45 minutes to chant it if you go like a machine gun. So most people can sort of just about get their head around it if they work with it 3-4 hours a day for 3 months. If you do it year in, year out, I noticed this after about 5-6 years of doing it. I can't remember it now, I have to say, but it's 15 years ago. But I could probably learn it again very quickly because it is sort of in my system. But you'd be sitting there chanting this, 20 minutes in your head, I'd notice my head was completely, totally empty. I have no clue where this is coming from. And you actually need someone to follow you with a book, because if you suddenly stop, it's like it can be very hard to work out exactly quite how to get back into it and quickly. So I understood from that, just the mind's capacity to be a channel for all sorts of things without any inner movement is amazing. In fact, most of what I've said today is coming out of that type of a space. The only preparation I've had for this talk is for what I'm saying is the years of sort of practice that I've done before. But so that's the way it goes. I mean, there's a little bit in the scriptures where the Buddha gives a talk, and he has this attendant, Ananda, who memorizes everything he says. And after the talk, the Buddha says to Ananda, have you ever heard the Dhamma described in that way before? And Ananda says, no, Lord, I've never heard you talk in that way before. And the Buddha says, I've never heard anything like that before either. So that's the way it is. That's the way we can become. We just learn to trust what's already operative within us. It's a brightness, and it's even in our language, we say someone is bright as a button, or she's a shining star, or he lights up the room, or something like that. It's there. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, because we can become possessed by it as well, addicted to accessing it in particular ways. But the result of accessing it in a mature way is basically faith, energy, wisdom, compassion, and serenity. It can also become sources of addiction when it becomes distorted. It expresses itself in our lives no matter what, because when it becomes distorted, it follows slightly different patterns. You can become a fundamental Buddhist. There's plenty of those. The culmination of Buddhism, in a sense, is the growing beyond it. Is the abandonment. The recognition that it's just a vessel that takes you from this shore to the next shore. Once you've reached the next shore, you step off the vessel and you walk away.
And to be able to do it in a Western setting, can you do at the level that you seem to have in a Western setting, or do you have to go to somewhere?
I've never been to Asia.
Oh, you've not been to Asia?
No. I was in an Asian tradition.
Oh, in an Asian tradition.
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to think, you have to get it from a sort of an Asian person. That's the real deal. But I think I've since realised that probably the Westerners are possibly better teachers for Westerners. They understand them better. And that Westerners have access to the same qualities, same levels of realisation as Asians. So, whether it needs to be Buddhism per se, I don't know. How people get there is their business, really. It's not for me to say. I'm not even a fanatical advocate of Buddhism per se.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's upaya. They call it skillful means.
I know that for myself, because the more simple it is for me, the easier it's becoming.
The key is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. You should learn those.
Right. Okay.
So you know what they are, because it's just it's fundamental to just getting a grip and giving you some purchase on the process. So you're not. It takes it from the abstract to the concrete. So it points to very concrete things. There's nothing intellectual about kidneys, nails, teeth, and skin. And so then you have to try and make sense of it, because it requires quite a bit of unpacking to kind of fill it out. But that can be left to you. You just because you're equipped with everything you need. You've got a body, you've got feelings and sensations. Yeah. Certainly there's nothing wrong with hope. It's very, very common for people to have some sort of spiritual kind of awakening experience. Ideal. The 4 foundations of mindfulness. Okay, the first one is the body. The second one is sensations that arise within the body. The third one is less familiar and bit more sort of difficult to describe. It's called the citta, which is it's basically the quality of luminous awareness that will arise as a result of embracing the body and embracing the sensations in the body. There will be a quality of luminous awareness. I mean, and it's not so sort of far out and mystical as you might think, in a sense. You drink a cup of coffee and you can feel a little brightening of the mind. Although
where does ritual?
Yeah, I know. I understand what you're saying. So one of the keys, one of the sort of first things that's really understood, I suppose, that there's a sign of moving forward with and moving on with within this tradition is understanding the relative nature of ritual. That by chanting and by I don't need to chant or bow to the Buddha or talk Buddha speak or any of these things in order to experience awakened mind. Awakened mind is completely independent of all of these things. So if someone came and chopped the head off the Buddha, it wouldn't completely unravel me. It would be like, okay, it's just a statue, although it's a statue that ideally should be treated with respect, because it's like theatre. Okay, so we're using theatre. All the ritual in Buddhism is theatre, and it's incredibly powerful. I mean,
I lived in Thailand for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Ritual.
Sure.
And I can't seem to quite manage all the other stuff without the ritual.
Okay, well, I mean, look, what we're all looking for is a centre. We're all looking for a centre, and we create what I call false centres of aliveness. So what a false centre of aliveness is basically is an addiction. Could be going down the pub for a drink, could be cooking delicious food, could be a glass of wine by the fireplace, could be gossiping, could be anything. Whatever you do and look forward to in a repeated way and becomes a sort of pattern that gets repeated again and again is a form of addiction. The one that we're all subject to is thinking. We get into these thinking ruts, don't we? Because we're trying to create some stability, some center around which we feel orientated. So one of the words in Buddhism for suffering, the word dukkha, comes from the word jur and ka, which means the nave of the wheel through which the axle pin is centered. So if you don't have a properly centered wheel, then it wobbles. It's not smooth, it wobbles and shakes. So if we don't feel centered on an axis, we feel like we feel wobbly all the time. We don't really feel grounded and secure. So we create or try to synthesize our best effort at a center, and more often than not is the thought I, which is, interestingly enough, is like a pivot, something around which we can pivot around. So ritual is about giving a concrete presence to an alternative center. So it's trying to create a skillful center where you can continuously be reminded and continuously learn to generate skillful action with regards to getting in touch with the real center, which is reality itself. So good ritual then has built into it a kind of a code. It's imagery, it's imagination, it's active imagination made manifest. So it's kind of imbued with all sorts of messages that are designed to help ignite the correct program within you and help you grow beyond these other addictions that ultimately always fail us. It's because they're supposed to. Existence, the universe is pointing us towards realizing our fullest potential.
It can be a very positive thing to have in your life.
Of course.
And how the two things sit.
Well, we value community, we value, human relationships are definitely a value, and your awakened nature does not feel isolated just in this, but also feels, in a sense, located within everybody else too. So there's a concern, same concern for others as you would have for yourself. Also, same benefits can be had from being with others, because you understand, like Jesus said, 3 or more of you gather in my name and I'll be there amongst you. So it's like, the reason we practice together like this is because we're like a battery with different cells. The more cells there are, the more vitality can be released. So, there's an appreciation that we can draw on each other's and contribute to each other's growth and benefit from each other's growth. So Sangha, community, is very much about recognizing that Kalyana Mita, spiritual friendship, spending time with the wise, hanging out with wise people. You learn by osmosis, much more than you ever learn from a book. In the monastery, it's just like, I was lucky, fortunate enough to live with some very sort of amazing human beings, and they're flawed. They're not, don't get me wrong, they're not like perfect, but in enlightenment it's not about being perfect, but you get just to see how they move and they walk and they sit down and how they hang out and what they talk about, and start to get affected by it. I mean, it's well understood that if you hang out with someone who's sort of awakened, their whole biochemistry is completely different, and if you hang out with someone who's got different biochemistry, it starts to change your biochemistry. You just feel it. I've been with some amazing sort of wise people, and you just sort of feel very enlivened just by being around them, and so you're sort of affected, and you never forget that feeling, being in the presence of a really mature human being. So if any benefits come from what I've offered, for example, this evening, most of it has come from the time that I've spent. It's the sum of many different parts. It's not just me being smart. Totally.
Walt Disney, for example, he's got a lot to answer.
He's got a lot to answer for.
Because I've been expecting a prince to turn up for years on a white horse, and just getting that lesson, and that's actually just happened recently.
Well, this image of, you use the image of a prince, but that image of the royal wedding and the royal marriage is very, very potent. And it's a very powerful image. Of course, we tend to... Sorry? Well, happily ever after, exactly. It's got some quality of immortality to it as well. So we tend to externalize that a lot, but it's a very important image, in fact, because awakening is some royal marriage. The royal marriage is between form and emptiness, or the finite and the infinite. The infinite nature of the universe wants to experience what it's like to be finite, and the finite part of the universe wants to experience it the other way. So it's like, and when those two meet, you get the igniting of the heart. It becomes whole, because you know that you've, in a sense, become free from the pain of isolation and the pain of old age, sickness and death and all of that. I mean, there's nothing that's going to make you feel better than that. And when you know that, your heart becomes happy and whole, and it enters into sada, faith, is the first of the 5 indriyas, which means giving your heart over to. So it's the entrusting of your heart to reality, because there's the recognition you're actually moving into this. You're electrified ultimately by the experience of this possibility, magnetized by it. And then the second of the indriyas is energy, which is this great enthusiasm for meeting life full on that comes about as a result of that. You become no longer afraid of meeting the darkness, because you know that anything that arises passes away, and in its passing there is peace. So you can take anything on. There's nothing. This is why the goodies always win, because luckily for us, good is reality, and evil is a false center of aliveness that's unsustainable.
It just prompted when you said so the good always wins, and I guess it's just broadening it to sort of reality at the moment, on the wider scales, and the big questions, and it doesn't look sometimes like the good are winning, and it looks like lots of people are losing. How that's balanced up.
Well, when what's happening is the world is moving into what's called liminal space, or transformational space. It's probably going to be in this space for the next 100 years or so. few hundred years, but basically what's happening is that the old structures are breaking down and the new structures have not quite emerged yet. But the idea that since the financial crisis, for example, that we're somehow going to go back to how it was, that's not going to happen. I don't believe. It's never going to be the same again. And so this transitional space is very chaotic, and it gives rise to a lot of fear and anxiety. So what tends to happen in the face of that fear and anxiety, many people will resort to black and white thinking and fundamentalism because it gives them a feeling of certainty and security. Whereas there'll be others who move into the new space, and that's already happening. I mean, it's happening in the sciences. It's happening all around the world. It's like, ask most young people about financial crisis, and it's like, well, whatever, I didn't have any shares anyway. Most young people don't have shares. You don't have all that stuff. It's not, because it's not as accessible as it used to be even. So, and a lot of young people who are, say, feeling lost, it's because the new sort of way of living and being that they would be more attuned to and make more sense to them hasn't quite emerged yet. And the old system is still is in its death throes. So the death throes can be quite unpleasant. That's what I believe is happening right now. But I feel positive about the future for humanity. I know, and I'm aware that there's a lot of issues at stake, but what I don't believe is so well understood is that we have solutions to most of the issues if we only have the will. We've got solutions to most of the energy crises and all sorts of things. We could clean the oceans up within a few years if we wanted to, and on and on. But the will isn't there, and we're not quite ready to make these radical changes. But particularly the younger generation, they're already doing it. I mean, there's incredible companies emerging, all sorts of amazing inventions coming up all the time now. Big new hot thing, not that it's necessarily even going to work, because there are some issues with it, is this solar roadways thing, which is a small company in America that's developed a way of turning all the roads into basically solar panels. If you laid all the roads in the USA with solar roadways, it would generate 3 times more energy than it needs, for example. So, when you think that we spend $4,000 a second on weapons and military things, obviously we could do that if we wanted to. And eventually the